Hi, Serah-Marie.
Hi, Alison.
How's it going up there?
It's pretty warm and cozy, which is nice inside. So as you said, I'm Serah-Marie McMahon. I'm the co-author of Killer Style. Yay! Along with you. So I'm a children's book editor and a children's book writer, and also I work at a bookstore selling kids books too. So I just spend all my time with children's literature, basically. What about you?
Well, I spent a lot of time with children's literature with you, but normally I teach at Ryerson and I run our master's program in fashion, and I research all of the many ways in which fashion may harm you, but also heal you. So normally I'm teaching and I'm researching, I'm writing, and talking to great authors like my co-author.
Yay! All right, I will read the introduction to the book.
Fantastic.
All right. Fashion Victims, which, by the way, I'll stop right there. That's the name of Alison's book that she originally wrote, which was put out, what year did it come out?
2015, yeah.
2015. And it's like a grown-up version of this book. That's how I usually say it. Fashion Victims. Famous fashion designer Oscar de la Renta coined the term fashion victims to describe the kind of consumer who blindly follows fads, loves logos, and wears whatever style dictates. They are the victims of marketing departments and advertising agencies, convinced to spend endless dollars on whatever is declared the newest, the trendiest, the hottest must-have fashion item. This book is certainly full of fashion victims, matching de la Renta's description. But more importantly, it is also filled with literal victims. It is about people who have suffered physical pain, injury, and worse, attempting to look more attractive or to make others look more attractive. This book is about when fashion kills. And it turns out there are lots of ways for fashion to be fatal. Fabric can burst into flame or become infested with disease-carrying bugs. That's like the worst chapter to read. Clothing can constrict, trip, tangle, and strangle. A scarf can behead. A hatter can be driven mad. Something as simple as a specific shade of green can sap life away. On the most basic level, we rely on clothing to protect us in our daily lives. It comforts us and shields us from the elements. And we like to think of grooming activities, such as dyeing our hair or putting on makeup, as pampering ourselves or showing our best face to the world. But you may be surprised to find out that from the top of our heads to the tip of our toes, the things we put on to look good can turn out to be very, very bad. I tried to write that in the voice of Professor Snape from Harry Potter.
Definitely
supposed to be like
Slytherin moments.
Yeah, a little bit.
All right, and I'm going to read a little excerpt from one of my favorite chapters, which is on poisonous green. So you were wondering how green could actually harm you. Well, and green is certainly my favorite color, although I'm wearing a naturally dyed pink scarf today. Now that I've read all about toxic dyes, I've become a natural dyer. That's been my COVID preoccupation and pastime.
I've seen the pictures; are so beautiful.
Yeah, it's been super fun. I now understand just how hard it is to dye green and why this particular kind of emerald green was so popular, because otherwise you really do have to dye with yellow and blue, and it's really hard to get a bright shade of green. It's actually impossible pretty much. So
I can totally
now I know why this was so people were so happy to have this, but also why it was so problematic. So poisonous green. In 1775, chemist Carl Wilhelm Scheele invented an exceptionally vibrant green pigment that could be applied to clothing, wallpaper, toys, and even candy. This particular pigment has gone by a few names over the years: emerald green, Paris green, Scheele's green, and as a nod to one of its original ingredients, arsenic green. Another name it goes by is poison green. Turns out arsenic is a highly toxic substance. Now, one of the stories really hit me, and this is her story. The Poisoned Wreath Painter. Matilda Scheuber was a young woman of 19 with a job at a London factory. All day long, she constructed wreaths of artificial flowers for fashionable ladies to wear in their hair. Matilda dusted green powdered pigment onto fake leaves with her bare hands. And on November 20th, 1861, that green would kill her. The press reported Matilda's demise in all its gruesome detail. Her fingers and the whites of her eyes had turned green. She told her doctor that everything she looked at appeared green before she vomited green water and stopped breathing. The story alarmed the members of an organization called the Ladies' Sanitary Association. They decided to hire a world-famous chemist to figure out exactly what had happened. The chemist published his findings in the London Times, and the news was not good. A single headdress contained enough arsenic to poison 20 people. He also found that a green gown could easily contain 900 grains of arsenic and shed 60 grains over the course of an evening of dancing. It would take only 4 or 5 grains to kill the average adult. Throwing shade on a shade. Once its lethal potential went public, there was a mass fear of all things green. Even after a non-toxic green dye was invented, no one wanted to wear it. Finally, in 1863, the French Empress Eugénie wore a brilliant green gown to the opera. Just as today's media goes wild when a movie star wears an attention-grabbing dress to the Oscars, the 19th century press went crazy for it. After all the media coverage, people came around to the new safe hue, named Nouveau Vert. And I think there were some other ways in which this story had kept on kind of coming back and having new life. And even though we've sometimes forgotten exactly why green is sort of a color that's associated with illness and fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's funny how we still think of a connection between green and illness, especially for things that are, it's a shorthand, right? So you have people like the Green Goblin, or from the Powerpuff Girls, the Mojo Jojo, the little monkey. Like they both ingest poison and then they become evil, they turn green. And then like even the emoji, like the sick emoji, he's got a green face, but we don't actually turn green. Like that's not a thing that happens. We look kind of ashen, but people don't turn green. Certainly not emoji green. But it's still to this very day, like the connection that we make between green. It really shows you how much like media affects how we think about things, because it was media that alerted people to know that green was the problem, which sent everybody against it. And then it was also media in the form of like seeing the celebrity wearing green who got them to go back on to wearing it again. So it's interesting how like the message, it's I find arsenic green is a story of rumors, you know, like it's really, that's like kind of the thing that controls that story. I thought that was really interesting. How did you do research for that? Like, how did you find this story?
Well, I've always, as I said, loved green, and I had been reading a bit about, there had been quite a bit of research done on other forms of toxic green, like green wallpapers. And
Okay.
sort of rumor, like people would come and, you know, they'd paper their wall in this beautiful green, and, you know, in an era when things were becoming gray and industrialized, people wanted green because it reminded them of nature, except that people living in these rooms, including the, you know, it's rumored Napoleon, although I don't, the paper he had, it actually came in other colors, arsenic wallpaper, luckily, but the green was the worst. And so people would come and they would get sick, and then they would leave their house, they'd get better, they'd come back, they'd get sick again, and sometimes even die. And so I knew it was a problem with wallpaper, but no one had really tested dress. So basically I phoned up our physics department, and the head of physics, I was a little bit intimidated, but she said, I love fashion. And she opened her state-of-the-art lab, and they were really eager. We tested fashion plates, we tested objects from the Bata Shoe Museum for our exhibition. We tested dresses. It was really, really exciting. So to kind of, yeah, to see if this was, and in fact, what happens too, the arsenic, people were like, were you, you know, was it a danger still? But what happened was it actually evaporates over time. So
Okay.
there wasn't a lot left, but we were able to detect the presence of arsenic.
Well, that's really interesting. If it evaporates and it was still there, that means there must have been so much at the time. Like if you can still detect it. Ooh.
Yes.
That's the other thing too that I find really interesting about green is how fast it all went. Like some things I find like lead poisoning, like and the hats, like that took hundreds of years before they really got stopped practicing, like stopped making that. But it seems like with the green dresses, it was like really, really quickly. So is there like what do you think makes it so that some of them take a really long time to be eliminated and some of them are eliminated really quickly?
Well, it was fashionable. It was invented in the late 18th century, so it was fashionable for a while, but it really took off in the when it really took off and became a mass trend. That's when it really got onto people's radars, because that's when the doctors were sort of really aware. Like the doctors were seeing fashionable women at the ball wearing these head wreaths with artificial leaves that were bright green, and seeing these bright dresses and seeing these women getting skin rashes from these products. But then the next morning in the hospital for the poor, they would see poor flower girls coming in with horrible arsenic poisoning, sores all over their faces. And so I think it was also in Victorian society, you wanted to protect a lot of the workers working with these pigments were young women like Matilda Scheurer, who was only 19 and often younger. So this idea of protecting women, whereas men who the consumer wasn't harmed by them, first of all, the mercury in hats, but also men's fashion went under the radar, right? It wasn't a problem. And also men who were working in these toxic industries were also, they took their own risks. So, yeah. But I think it was because it was so visible also. Like people were very suspicious of this green.
Right. Because it happened so quickly. Whereas with the lead, the symptoms would show up over long periods of time, right?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't instantaneous. Like it would take years and years and years. So I can only guess that must have meant it was harder to identify exactly what it is, as opposed, or at least if there's more deniability. Whereas with the green, like if it goes that quickly, like those pictures are so.
And these were the hands of the flower makers, and obviously, they got stained green, and it really affected your skin. So it was very visible on many levels.
Yeah, so it's interesting how something that where the symptoms will take longer, it'll also take them longer to eliminate or get rid of out of society. I always thought that was really interesting.
I feel like with this book, our fates are intertwined, because I had known Serah-Marie for years, and we went on a very long road trip together to a conference in Montreal, which was a lot of fun.
When we never even met before.
No.
It was like the first time we knew each other. Yeah.
Out of the blue. And then I always loved Serah-Marie's journal, Worn, her fashion journal, and I brought her in to speak to my students. And then I had done this exhibition at the Bata Shoe Museum called Fashion Victims, and they had wanted me to think about turning it into a book, and I didn't really know how to write. I'd already just done this exhibition for the public, and then how do I write for children, even though I had children? And then I went into type books, and I ran into Serah-Marie and said, I'm struggling to do this, to write for children. So, and then she came back and said,
well, first I gave you notes. I just gave you a whole bunch of ideas on how to do it. And then I think you were like, can you do it? Which I think turned out really great. And then I think it worked out really perfectly. Like what I did is I took all your research, and there was so much of it and so detailed and so in depth. And I tried to break it down into sections, kind of like a magazine, which is what I'd done before. So I tried to see it in the same way, how each story could have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and how it was really important for me, because talking for kids, that there be a conclusion at the end that gave hope, that was like, we can solve these problems, we can overcome, and it didn't feel so like hopeless, which I thought was like a really a good thing to do for kids. So, but the stories were there, like they were already embedded in all your research and all your work. And I added a few other topics, like a few more things that felt like relevant to kids, or maybe a little bit more known to somebody who's like a fashion academic, but less to like a kid. So it wouldn't have been relevant for your book, but is for a kid's book.
Exactly. You brought in and the sense of humor and all of that.
Yes, lots of puns. That was my husband, Ted, too. He was like my pun master. It was very weird to do something with puns for a book about death. I had to be really careful. And I remember having this really long conversation with my editor where we kind of figured out that the further, like the longer ago the event had happened, the more comfortable it was using things like puns and humor. And the more recent the event, the like less.
Yeah. The more you wanted
it felt okay to do, and like kind of the more serious you needed to be. So there's sort of an algorithm to like when you can apply humor and when you can't. But I think it's important to have at least a little bit to kind of brighten the mood a little bit, because otherwise it can get really like heavy. I know when I was doing the research on the Radium Girls, especially in the Radium section, it was like really hard. Like I really had to take really big breaks even from it. I remember even crying on the subway one day.
Oh yeah. And I felt the same way. Some days I couldn't read any more of like the sources that I was studying, or so it's often a tough thing. So
yeah, because sometimes the things are accidents. Like sometimes it's really truly like people didn't know, or there's just like pure error, or people like took a chance, but they understood the chance that they were taking, and those things all happened. People wearing like the little fitted skirts, like they knew like that it was going to be kind of dangerous. You know what I mean?
To not be able to walk. So yes, you could have an accident while trying to get on and off the streetcar. It was a possibility for sure.
Yeah, but you kind of knew that going in. Like as a wearer, you kind of took the risk. But the thing with the Radium, which was like really scary to me and so sad, was that it was so about a big corporate company knowing and kind of not caring. Like really like understanding that the product that they were asking their workers to work with, they had a really good understanding that it was hurting them, and they just like forward anyways. And
economic interests weigh out over the health interests and the well-being of the workers. That's a really hard thing.
Yeah, those every time that kind of story pops up and it pops up a lot. Like it does happen over and over again. But to me, that was the hardest stuff, because it felt intentional, and then it makes me sad about mankind. So there was no puns in that section. But there are other places because like sometimes
Victorians themselves were quite funny often about like with sort of black humor about what was going on too. Like you'll see them call these socks made with chemical dyes. They gave people skin burns, and they call them, chromatic torpedoes. So they are pretty funny actually. Sometimes themselves, like the language they use. So you can kind of take some of that, I think. And it was really fun for me to take this academic research and really share it with all these different publics, like, through the people coming to the museum, but also children, like, getting to read a book that isn't just sort of how to style yourself or how to, it doesn't take fashion. It takes fashion seriously. It's not a frivolous thing. It has huge economic, health, environmental impact, as we know, right? So
yeah. It's one of the few things that we all share in common. Like everybody gets dressed in the morning, like I guess with the exception of nudists, but we all get dressed.
We can all relate to it, I think, and that's what I love about this area, to kind of communicate, just to get people to think a bit more about what they're putting on their bodies every day.
Yeah.